Hi, everybody. Today we'll discuss about burns.
National Academy of Burns 2018 statistics. In fact, the burns are on the rise and they are the second largest group of injuries after road accidents. 7 million people in India, they suffer burn injuries every year on an average. The incidence is under-reporting. More cases you will see than what is reported here. 1.5 lakhs die and 2.5 lakhs left crippled due to burns. 4 out of 5 are women and children, and unfortunately most of them are in the productive age group of 15 to 40 years. The socio-economic status is poor, and 80% of admissions are due to accidents at home, mostly kitchen related mishaps. Now, what is the definition of burns? Coagulative necrosis of epidermis and underlying tissues. That is the definition of burns. To repeat, coagulative necrosis of epidermis and underlying tissues. In this process, there is a transfer of heat plus direct injury to cellular membranes is happening. The target in this process is capillary endothelium. Now, the damaged capillary endothelium leaks water, electrolytes, and plasma proteins from intravascular compartment to extravascular space. And this predominantly occurs in the first 36 hours, and it doesn't include RBC. When burns occupy 25% or more of the body surface area, remember, inflammatory reaction causes fluid loss in vessels removed from burn injury. That area may not be burned, may not be involved in the accident, but still fluid loss occurs when burns are more than 25%. And in more than 15% of burns, when body surface area is burned, shock is produced. This burns happens when you get contact with flames, hot liquids, gases, surfaces, chemicals, electricity, radiation, or a combination of these things. Commonly, hot liquids and gases will occur as a combo offer. The cellular damage starts at 44 degrees centigrade and above. Taking the constant temperature, duration of exposure, and magnitude of burning agent, basing on one important factor, that is perfusion of tissues, the local tissue suffers the damage. Example, face, which is rich in blood supply, taking into consideration above 3 factors as a constant, when you compare with the back, face suffers less burn injuries because of exchange of temperature due to high blood circulation. You take the back where the skin is thick, the blood supply is meager. Again, for the same temperature and same duration, the back suffers deeper burns. It all depends upon the perfusion of tissues at that area. Most common in the burns, skin is injured, its function is compromised. Now let us quickly recollect what are the functions of skin and which are compromised. Skin acts as a barrier to injury, infection, it assists in thermoregulation, and it is a sensory organ. Loss of skin results in fluid and electrolyte imbalance, loss of plasma and RBC, loss of internal tissue integrity, And finally, loss of immunomodulator function. As we have seen in the burns, skin is most commonly injured. All these functions are compromised. The burns can be, the area can be classified into 3 zones: zone of coagulation, zone of stasis, zone of hyperemia. These are the 3 zones in any given burns. Zone of coagulation, that is, tissue is irreversibly damaged. It is dead. Zone of stasis, this is immediately surrounding the necrotic zone. It may survive or it may pass on to the stage 1 or zone 1 coagulonecrosis. Surrounding zone of stasis, we have zone of hyperemia. Basing on the depth, burns can be classified into partial thickness and full thickness. In partial thickness, the burns are moist, red, and you find blisters. Whereas in full thickness, they're white or brown, dry, they're firm to touch. First degree burns, the epidermis is intact. Now, second degree burns involves the dermis. Basing on whether it is involving papillary dermis or reticular dermis, it is classified into superficial second degree, deep second degree. Superficial second degree means it is involving the papillary dermis only. Deep second degree denotes it is involving the reticular dermis. Third degree subcutaneous fat is involved. When muscle and bone are involved, that is called fourth degree burns. First degree burns, epidermis is intact. There is no scarring. It heals in 3 to 4 days. The only treatment required is some soothing or comfort. Give some slight analgesics, that's all. Second degree burns, it is limited to the dermal layers of skin. Length of time to heal divides the burns into superficial and deep. Superficial means papillary dermis is involved. It takes 2 weeks to heal. Deep burns means reticular dermis is involved. It takes 3 weeks to heal. In the second degree burns, nerve endings are damaged but not destroyed. So persistence of pain to pinprick is present. If fluid resuscitation is inadequate, plus adding infection, the second degree burns can go into full thickness burns, that is third degree or fourth degree. Full thickness third or fourth degrees involves all layers of skin plus subcutaneous tissue. Third degree, skin appendages plus sensory fibers for pain, temperature, and pressure are destroyed. So third degree burns are essentially painless. We have seen second degree burns, the nerve endings are damaged but not destroyed. Pain is present. Here, in contrast, they are painless. Fourth degree burns means involving fascia, muscle, and bone. In burns, shock is produced by 2 reasons. One is hypovolemia, second is pain. Hypovolemia is due to blister fluid, exudation, edema, evaporation. Because there is no skin, the body fluids get evaporated very quickly. These are the 4 reasons for the hypovolemic shock in the burns. Now, if you take systemic changes in a case of severe burns, there is vascular permeability. Already we have seen from intravascular to extravascular, there is a shift of fluid. That results in edema. And altered hemodynamics occurs. There is immunosuppression, and this is a catabolic process. It results in hypermetabolism. there is a decreased renal blood flow and increased gut mucosal permeability. These are the few systemic changes in a case of major burns. In the systemic changes, we are continuing in the systemic changes. Inflammatory mediators, both in wound and other tissues, are more produced, resulting in cytotoxic T cell immune function, it decreases, resulting in bacterial and fungal invasion. There is no immune function is compromised. So you expect more bacterial and fungal infections. Hypermetabolism is due to partly release of catabolic hormones like catecholamines, glucocorticoids, and glucagon. In the first aid directions, if there is a burns, what to do? First is remove from the source. If it is an electrical burn, switch off the current, irrigate, and transport to the nearest hospital. These are the first aid directions in a case of burns. Now, once you are shifted to the hospital, you have to estimate the burn size. Roughly, palm of a patient's hand is 1% of body surface area of that person. There is some rule of 9 in children, that is roughly you can estimate the percentage of body surface area burnt. But when you compare to the adults, in children, we have large proportion for head and neck area. Basing on the age, some modifications are done. In children, again, there is less area in lower extremities. Again, we are comparing with the adults. And Lund-Browder charts used commonly for larger burns. This is a rule of 9 where you can do assess rapidly on the clinical side, on the bedside, rapidly assess the percentage of burns. If you see this, head and neck 9%, head, neck is 1%. Then front of the chest and abdomen 18%, back 18%, upper limbs each 9%, lower limbs 18%, each lower limb comes to 100%. This is a good clinical guide to assess the burns rapidly on the bedside. If you see the children, what are the modifications? Whereas in the adults, head and neck comes to 10%. In children, it is 18%. Large area. Again, you compare the lower limbs. In children, it is 14% each, whereas in adults, it is 18% each of the lower limbs. These are the major differences. So we'll do accordingly adjustment in assessing the burns area in a particular individual. This is Lund-Browder chart, which can be used in a larger burns. Initial assessment, we give oxygen 100%. When you give, in a case of facial burns, neck burns, inhalation in a confined space, that is a closed space, like a fire in a house, fire in a vehicle, in a car, in a train compartment, anywhere, a confined space. And again, you give thermal burns, you give 100% oxygen. When burns are associated with explosions, barrow and blunt trauma, you give 100% oxygen initially. When the burns of the respiratory system, when do you suspect? When the burns involve face and neck, take it granted there may be involvement of the respiratory system. Second, burns occurring in a confined space, like we have already seen, in a room, in a closed hall, in a vehicle. Think of respiratory system involvement. when the patient presents with change in voice or stridor, think of the involvement of respiratory system. You should be aware. This is exactly what happened in 29th December 2017 when a pub fire in Mumbai, 14 dead. Here you see it is a confined space, one thermal injury, inhalation injury, and also carbon monoxide injury. You can see all this. All this combined together to produce that high casualty, 14 dead and 21 injured. After giving the oxygen, now we need intravenous access by 16 gauge needle or a large venous catheter must be placed. If not, you do a venesection. Because of vasoconstriction, there will be circulatory collapse. You have to get access to intravenous route by giving a large needle, or commonly we do a venesection. Immediate care is stop the burning process. We'll see in the pictures, number of pictures, people running when their clothes gets fire. So it adds fuel to the fire. The best thing is stop, don't run, drop to the ground and roll. That's how you extinguish the fire. Stop, drop and roll. Now check for other injuries like airway, breathing and circulation. Now after years of discussions, deliberations and debates, whether to pour cool water or not, they come to a conclusion. Now cool the burn wound. You may ask, suppose cool water is not available. No problem. You use the room temperature water. This doesn't going to produce or worsen the burns. Now, what will happen if you pour cool water or you're cooling the burn wound? It produces immediate analgesia, one. It decreases the depth of the burn, especially in partial thickness burns. But the important point is you avoid hypothermia. And we have seen two students in my previous institute. One lady student came to our surgery OPD yelling with, oh my God, she got a burns. She went to casualty. She was sent to surgery OPD. So immediately I asked the sister to get a basin, put a cool water. There are fridges everywhere, cool water in that institute. So I asked her to dip your hand in the cool water till I say, okay. So immediately she got analgesia, and also it increases the outcome by decreasing the depth of the burn. Now magical numbers, what is this 60, 10, 20? We'll come to that in a moment. When patient is shifted to hospital care, the care is like as in any acute trauma, A, B, C, D, E, F. A is get access to airway control. Now check the breathing and ventilation. C is circulation. Fourth, D is disability. Neurological status must be assessed. E, exposure with environmental control. And F, fluid resuscitation. This is a logarithm, A, B, C, D, E, F, for any major trauma, including burns. Now, when you admit somebody, there are some criteria. Less than 10 years or more than 50 years with more than 10% of body surface area burnt, that patient deserves admission. And more than 15% of body surface area burns, either partial or full thickness, these patients need inpatient admission and care. We've already seen more than 15% body surface area is burnt, it produces shock. Shock, you cannot treat it as outpatient treatment. It must be admitted. Fundamentally, the higher the body surface area, the pressing demand for admission or inpatient treatment. So we are going by the percentage of the burns, but there are some exceptions. Always we do not go by percentage. When burns involve joints, hands, feet, perineum, genitalia, face, eyes, ears, you forget the percentage. Immediately give them inpatient treatment by admitting. Again, when full thickness burns more than 5% or inhalation burns, we have seen in a closed room, chemical burns, electrical burns, when burns associated with mechanical trauma and pre-existing medical problems like diabetes, hypertension, cardiovascular diseases, when these are present, admit the patient, give inpatient treatment without bothering about the percentage of the burns. Tetanus prophylaxis can be given, and fluids are calculated from time of injury, not from the time of evaluation and admission. That is, suppose morning 6 o'clock burns happen, the patient reaches hospital at 8 o'clock, 8 a.m. You start counting the fluid balance from 6 a.m. and not from the 8 a.m. when you examine the patient. Antibiotics are given, but remember immediately after the burns is a sterile wound. All the microbes are burnt, evaporated, for deep fried now. But immediately as the time goes on, as the immunity is compromised, skin functions compromised, the wound likely to get infected. Now, Foley's catheter is inserted in all major burns, that is more than 15%, which are likely to produce shock. The best clinical monitoring for your fluid replacement is renal function. Now, you should have aim of urine output 1 ml per kg per hour in children. That is a target. Whereas in adults, 0.5 to 1 ml per kg per hour. So if you achieve that target, your fluid resuscitation is adequate. If you underperfuse, urinary output decreases. Generally, nasogastric tube is passed because patient may have nausea, vomiting, distension of abdomen, and edemic ileus. Fluids are given when burns are 15% or more in adults, 10% or more in children. We know 15% or more produces shock. Shock means you have to give IV fluids. Again, another aim is maintain the circulation to prevent renal failure and early death. Burn wound management comes later. First is your priority is to prevent renal shutdown and early death. For that, you need to give fluids. If patient is able to take oral fluids, don't forget to add salt. That's one. Second thing, how much fluid? That is the next question. That can be calculated from standard formulas. And if you start fluids, you can monitor your resuscitation by counting the urine output. Resuscitation formulas. There are a number of resuscitation formulas. Anyone can be chosen. Some use crystalloids, some use colloids, some use fresh water is added. But any one of these can be followed. Parkland is the commonly followed formula. that is 4 ml of crystalloid per kg body weight per percent of total body surface area burnt. Here we don't give any colloid, no free water. Brook, Galveston, these are the guidelines, and you should be continuously monitor, adjust the rate of fluid administration accordingly. So monitoring is most important. Parkland formula, this is most commonly followed. So percentage of total body surface area burned into weight in kgs into 4 is equal to volume in ml. Now half of this volume is given in the first 8 hours. That is from the time of occurrence of burns, you count 8 hours. Okay, not from the time of admission into the hospital. This must be remembered. Second half, you give in the subsequent next 16 hours. In children, we make some modifications because we have to maintain the fluid balance. Dextrosaline is added. And again, in the first half you give 8 hours, second half subsequent 16 hours. Ringer lactate is the commonest used crystalloid. Human albumin solution, HAS, or hypertonic saline can also be used, but Ringer lactate is the most commonly used crystalloid. Now blisters. Blisters we have seen, they occur in superficial burns. The presence of blister means they are superficial burns. Now the question is either to remove or not to remove blisters. Remove means puncture. If you just puncture, the fluid will drain out, the blister will collapse. Whether to do it or not to do it, that is the question. There are 2 schools of thought. One is, first school, they say blister fluid decreases immune function. Second, the blister slows down chemotaxis, intracellular killing, and it forms a good medium for bacterial growth because of the blister fluid. Second school thought, don't disturb the blisters because they form a sterile stratum spongiosum. But most people follow the first school. You take a sterile needle, just puncture the blister, let the fluid out, the blister collapses. This is the most commonly followed method. Now we'll conclude it in the next class.